Greeting and welcome to the Laughing Monkey Music Show. Today we have on producer, engineer, composer, songwriter, John Hiler. How are you doing, man?
Great, man. How are you?
I'm just glad I could say your last name right. So
That
we're
makes
already we're
you in a select elite crew.
excellent, excellent. So I wanted to talk to you today. You've been on such an enormous amount of albums, either your own stuff, and the state of music has been a little different too, with not just with COVID, but a lot of the digital changes. And I know you're a computer guy and you love to build everything. I think we can kind of dig into a few things today.
Absolutely.
For the audience, if we could do the old tiny little bio for the people that aren't familiar with you, so we can jump in and just get totally sidetracked and be geeks.
Totally.
The rest of the show. Just a tiny bio if we could from you.
Absolutely. I was raised in New York, born in New York City. I'm a fourth generation classical pianist. My background was originally classical. I went to conservatory for composition, but then I split all that and went to LA to start the world of working in recording studios. I was an early expert on MIDI, and I built some of the first MIDI production studios, and the also good at computers growing up. So those two fields lined up pretty well. Cut my teeth in studios in LA for a long time, worked with a lot of great artists. Then I went to Chicago for about 10 years and worked with a lot of great bands there. And then back to LA and worked with even more great bands and artists. And I've done some scoring for picture and sound design and all that other sort of fun stuff too. I also consult other people in studios with their technical issues and help them out and that, back end sort of thing as well. That's about it. I release music under the rubric Aerosol. We've got a new record coming out soon. I'm very excited about. Work with many great musicians on that, and also working with some other artists as a producer and mixer. So that's basically it in a nutshell.
That's great. That's good. I mean, we can go on and on. And the links for all your stuff will be underneath it. I mean, the
Great.
bands and the artists you work with is just such a long list and it's such a varied list. We don't need to do a detailed thing. But what was important is what you talk about. What I really like is your creativeness, your inventiveness mixed with your technology, your love of technology, and your self-complaining. Was it your Hackintosh or what is it? What do you call it?
Yeah. I use Hackintoshes. In fact, I just got my new one online this week. So geeking out a little bit on that one. So that's fun. My last one lasted me like 9 years. So I got my money's worth out of it. That's for sure.
The problem is when you build that, you are your own support person too if there's a problem because no one understands what the heck you built.
No, yeah, that's okay. I know I'm out there in the nosebleed seats with this stuff, and I wouldn't expect anybody else to follow accordingly. It's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure. A lot of work, a lot of hours, a lot of coding, but I'm happy with the result and it works. And that's all that matters, right? Is that we have tools that help us do our jobs, right?
Well, you're actually making tools. That's the interesting part I like. And you're creating your own tools. To be like a caveman, also you're like, you go, they got rocks and you're like, you go make yourself a spatula for cooking. It's kind of like
Right.
you gotta fine tune it. I mean, you can do this, but you come back, you're like, oh.
Well, it's true, but at the end of the day, they're only tools, and it doesn't mean that's going to mean the work is any good. That I've seen people with the best sets of tools make horrible work, and I've seen people with a couple of fingers and a baseball bat do great work. So it's not the sword, it's the swordsman, I guess you'd say.
I'd say that arguably also depends on the journey of how it goes from the artist to the producer and the engineer and the tools. I think it's a combination. If you get that perfect storm, that's
Absolutely.
really going to be the best because you can be the best artist, but if the tools aren't right, you can sound like crap too. How many great musicians with their first albums you can't listen to because they were done by, or how many
Yeah.
albums have like the worst
Yeah.
sounds? You're like, oh, I love
I
that
mean,
band, but
especially for people like you and me, I think they can listen and sort of in our minds hear a production or a mix and separate those from the song. I think mostly the uninitiated react to the emotion of the song, and they don't care too much, about what technology went into it. We might say, "Oh, that's a terrible mix," but it's still a hit, Wasn't Prince famous for not giving his engineers time to get proper levels, and things would come out distorted and be very frustrating environment to work in as a technical person? But nobody cared in the long run, did they?
No,
Because it was
no,
Prince. Yeah.
you got away with it. And that's the thing. I think when I went to college for recording and spending a year or so, wherever it was, break down to, and really breaking down songs. After that, it just kind of ruined music. My levels are like, it's like almost going off to like culinary school. Like you just come back into the regular world, you're like, you hear things so different.
Yes, absolutely. I used to joke about what it'd be like to sit through a movie with a freshman film student. You know what I mean? And it's true. It can ruin you. In fact, I think later on in my path, I've tried to be able to put on the listener's mind,
Yeah.
and hear it as a consumer, hear the end result as someone who's not dissecting it, because it's so easy as we learn the sort of machinery behind the curtain. There's a certain comfort in being able to interpret and dissect what's happening, and we have to guard against that, because it can be ego driven. It can be like, oh well, I know how they did that, and this is how blah blah blah, and we feel good because we understand that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It's that thing about like, is the sausage taste good? Great. Don't ask how it's made.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, and I never like, don't think I'm like the great anything, because I never became a producer, but like I'm saying, I just know what I like as a person. So it's almost like cooking for your own food. Like, you know what you like, but like, I get why people like other stuff. Right. I just know how. I'm like, oh, I think for me and my personal taste, like, and I know I like things differently anyhow. So they hear these different sounds and the changes and stuff, or the production.
Right.
And there's still albums to this day. Like, I agree with you. You still have to step outside of yourself to kind of hear what other people like and why they like it.
It's very personal. What is that saying? You can play a song to 1,000 people, and each person will hear a different song. So it's really how it goes through their filter and their life experience, and how it touches them, that really defines, I think, the value of the thing. We as artists, all we can do, like a chef, to continue the food analogy, we can present the food, but we're not restaurant critics. We can't decide what's good or bad. That's not our job. Our job is to create and to put it out there, and to be as authentic and real and honest as we can with our product. And hopefully that human element will connect with somebody, right, at some level. But you're right about technology. There is an important thing, especially with modern production. And I guess you could say this about, if you expanded the definition of technology to include whatever instruments were available at the time, that's always an important thing. In cooking, it's the same way. If you want to make Indian food, like, you need a tandoor oven, and you need certain spice blends and certain clarified butters. And then when you use those authentic ingredients, then whatever you do has a degree of authenticity to it. What I love about production, working with artists, is that we make that a conscious choice. I'll be like, all right, this album evokes this certain era, this certain sound, so let's choose our technology that reinforces that idea, that message, that sort of concept. It's a lot like picking the frame to a piece of art. If you have a beautiful classic Renaissance painting or something, you're not necessarily going to put a thin metal frame around the edge of it. It would seem incongruous, and that might be part of what you're getting at too, and that's to be considered. But usually you'd want to have something that sort of matched it or enhanced the art, and I think that's a very valuable rule for technology, and nowadays.
I agree. I think that most artists want to have the matching frame and the matching sound or whatever. And then you get the other artists will go like, nope, it's $1 million Picasso, not even put in a frame. You know what I'm saying? That will go the left turn. I mean, and that's the thing. And that's one thing that I appreciate the most, like when artists that were more established and then they have a new album now, and you hear, and it feels like they have a leg in both things. Like, it still has their sound, but it also sounds modern without them trying to sound modern. They've taken on the instrumentation and the technology. That makes sense. Like,
absolutely.
I can say like the new, we'll go for a lighter band. I like the new Crowded House album.
Okay.
The production is great, and it has the feel of the old, because with them, they have that, the big thing with them is a lot of space in the songs, and it has a very haunting, to me, that's how I hear it.
Right.
But it has that in a way, but not 100%. But then I also like new instruments and always playing instruments and trying things and recording. So that, so the new album it feels like some songs could have been like from the 60s with Burt Bacharach, and like the next song has an influence of horn, you know what I'm saying? And it's fantastic to have those two worlds. And I love when bands do that. One of the things that I've as I got older, like with those bands that you feel like you're at a certain sound. When I realized my hearing was going bad, I got hearing aids. So I put the hearing aids in. You for so long, you start not hearing things, you don't realize it.
Right.
So I fall in love with music again. You start appreciating things. So then that time, and then after I started playing guitar, I started doing these deep dives with music that maybe I thought was boring growing up, and maybe I still wouldn't like now.
Right.
But then you sit down, you play guitar, or with my hearing aids, and you're hearing things differently. You're older, and your ears are fresher. You go like, I get it. I get why people like it. I'm still not going to listen to it or whatever.
Right. But you've grown an appreciation for it.
And I'll actually go through the catalog. I'll go through so I know what I'm talking about, because I hate when people say something they just they know what they're talking about, and they really haven't listened to. They heard one song. I'm like, I've actually listened to all their stuff.
Right.
And give it a fair shot and say, and like with guitar, it's the same thing. You play a song, you ever play a song that you're like, yeah, kind of boring. It's in the elevator. Then you actually play the instrument, the song, and you're like, oh, this is kind of guilty fun. It's just like candy. You know what I mean? You're buying candy or at reference.
Exactly. It reminds me of another analogy I like to use, which is the difference between the song and the production, right? If the song is a beautiful model, like a runway model, right? Then if it's that great a song, you can pretty much hang almost any kind of production off of it, and it's still gonna sound great. A beautiful model can walk down the runway in a burlap sack and look sexy and attractive and desirable and all those things. The same way a great song can be produced in many different ways and still be great. And I think the evidence to that is how many great classic songs can be covered by so many artists and still be relatively successful. Of course, the other side of the coin is where you have someone that's a total jerk, but they're dressed in an amazing $3,000 suit. It somehow that just because the suit is so great doesn't make make you want to hang out with them anymore. So I think that shows us that production always serves the music, and maybe in the crowded house thing, it's still them. It's still those human beings writing those songs and performing those parts. So much of it is in the fingertips, right? But then, do you expect those people to still dress the way they did 20 years ago? No, they're going to.
I'm not that person.
Right? So you're going to find new styles, new clothing, new glasses, whatever it might be. And when you see them again, you're like, hey, there's my old friend, but they've got a new, outfit on, or a bucket hat, or whatever it is that's happened right now. And so it's interesting to see them in their sort of updated form, but you still have that care for them because it's the same person.
Right. And I think it's hard. That's when you get to the school of audiences where you're like, some people just don't want to let it go. And some people, and less people, like I appreciate it, like the fact that for their it's a clothes, they're always adding new instrumentation and new things, new flavors and layers to their music and trying different things,
Mm-hmm.
Now in the band are his sons that are two talented musicians. So you got a new energy. And when you get family members that sing together, it's the best.
Yeah.
Right. The voices of family members that can sing, not all family members.
Right. Absolutely.
We're talking talented. It's the best,
Yeah.
So when you have that energy, yeah, exactly. But when you have that all together, it adds to it. So I'm very supportive of an artist growing and changing and doing something different.
Uh-huh.
But then sometimes the audience is like, it's not my favorite, but then it's not going to, sell records. So the challenge is, how do you become a new artist, an established artist, and grow as an artist, and still be honest to you, cater to your audience, yet try to grow, because if you don't sell any albums, you can't afford a tour, and why even record?
Right.
It's an awful cycle. You know what I mean? So you're kind of trapped.
I think it was Peter Frampton that said everything started to go south when he started trying to make the music that he thought his audience wanted to hear. And that's an important thing as an artist. And it requires us to, check in with our priorities. Are we doing this to make money? If we were lucky to have a hit, are we chasing that hit? Are we trying to break out? There's some artists that just came out with new records this past few weeks or months, and I won't mention them, but you can tell that they are like, okay, the first record was a breakout record, and now they're going to bring in all these ringer songwriters and all these top people because the label and the management and everyone is pushing for the next big hit, which to me ignores what made it great to begin with, which is the authenticity and maybe the lack of such pressure and expectation, and I think that can ruin a product. I think that will
in
end
the
a lot
band,
of
in the
that
band too.
sophomore
You know what I
slump
mean?
sort of stuff.
I think everyone's a band because say you get the band that has the one big album, and
Mhm.
then if they don't get help, and the audience expects that same album, and the band's like, I want to do this, or also other guys in the band like, I want to write. If I could people about that, else and they're like, yeah, and I was like, guys, like I'm fine, but that I was my songs were the sound I got assigned, but
Right,
okay, and then the next album's not do as well because everyone's
right,
writing. So there is a certain thing. So sometimes, or the band, writes their own songs. Sometimes they need that sophomore one that go down, and then they have their successful third,
right,
fourth. They can build off it. Back in the
right.
day when you could do that, you know what I mean?
The
Because
hero's
sometimes you need
journey,
that.
where things sort of, the Empire Strikes Back
Yeah,
chapter, where things kind of go a little south.
I think you need the scars to kind of appreciate it as you go along. If you get the
Well,
home run,
it,
you're not
it
gonna.
it does help. It does help. That doesn't mean it's a prerequisite, but it can help people to refocus. Uh, some people say that success is actually more of a curse, and then failure is the greater teacher. When you have success, you tend not to analyze. You tend to just accept it at face value, or even worse, give yourself credit for it, and then you tend to grow less. Whereas those that experience failure, and I've had more than my share, that's for sure. It
Mhm.
certainly makes us assess and analyze and sort of say what happened, what can we do better next time, what are the priorities, what should they be, what missteps did we make, what pitfalls can we avoid next time, all of that stuff. So hopefully we become a better artist in the process.
So with your personality, you're pretty laid back. You kind of blend in. I feel probably with the artist. What is the challenge now when you go in with your personality and working with them on their songs? Because you do a little both, right? You write your own, you write jingles, and you also
Right,
working with the artist.
right.
Is there I mean, do you step back sometimes? Do you kind of, how do you balance that?
Well, the cool thing is that every artist is unique, and some artists require a firmer hand than others. Other artists, it's a pep talk, and they're on their way. Um, some artists require really rolling up the sleeves and popping the hood and getting in there and doing some serious work. A big part of it, I think, is has to do with sort of, well, how do I say it? Like having a vision. I have to have a vision for the project before I take it on. And what that means is I have to hear the final results in my head. I'd say about 80% there. I try to leave about 20% for it to teach me what it wants to be
Really?
also.
Okay, that's
But
interesting.
but I think the vision is really important because, and I won't take a project if I don't see a vision that I think is great for that artist and that artist's songs. I think, and that vision could be as simply a matter of tracks sound great. We're just going to give them a really kick-ass mix and we'll be done. Versus other artists who bring me demos and scratch vocals and say, you know, let's help me do this. So I'm very conceptual in that approach. I have to have the big picture first because there's a saying, if a farmer wants to plow a straight line, he stares at a point on the horizon, knowing full well he'll never actually get there.
Right.
But what it does is it gives us this focal point, so that when it's 3 in the morning and the guitarist has an idea for a crazy solo and we're not sure. I mean, it could be good in and of itself, but to me that must serve the bigger picture. And so ultimately, that's the litmus test of what we're working on and how much effort is going into it. Is it helping us get to the ultimate goal? Not like, oh, I got a new guitar pedal or a new plugin or a new virtual synth. I want to use it. That's not really enough of a justification for it. It has to serve the greater good. And with some artists, like I said, it's just encouraging helping them in the right direction. And with other artists, it's really getting in there and co-writing and doing a lot of sort of, but even in that process, it always references to where we're aiming for with the big picture, And so the first discussions I have with the artists is, where are we going with this? What are your hopes and dreams and goals with this project? And here's what I see and how I think this could work and what would be interesting. I especially love the combination of something that's referencing something from the past, but also some new, slightly different variation on it, right? They say, I keep using the food analogy, but to me, they're very similar. No one wants a completely new food that they've, blue squares or whatever it might be, no matter how good it is, whatever. Most people are interested in just a new flavored hamburger, something that's like familiar to them, but also new and different. And that to me is one of the perfect balances you can try to achieve, which is something that's reminiscent, but also new and different. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it totally does. And that's the thing. I mean, you don't have an ego. So that's the other thing we talked earlier. So you put the ego aside and you're more of a support team, and you can be like the cheerleader or the leader or the coach. Right. It feels like you're really malleable where your position will move around to what's needed.
You have to wear a lot of different hats.
But there are, I think I've learned it's just really two schools of producers and engineers and kind of whatever. There's one that kind of has their own vision of what they think it's going to be and how they're going to do it, and one that's kind of curious where it's kind of go with what needs to be done. And both of these actually work too. Because some artists need the other strong arm, or are okay with it. I mean, it's just two different ways of doing it.
Well, and once I get an artist on board with the vision, that doesn't mean that every day is hunky-dory either, because often the artist will maybe not want to stick with that vision or suddenly want to throw it out. And I can become quite the taskmaster. And, I'm not necessarily there to be your best friend. Let's put it that way. I'm here to help us get to where we're trying to go. Another analogy that I love is that of the Sherpa. You're the one that wants to climb Mount Everest. Fine. Well, I'm going to show us which way to get there, and I'll do most of the heavy lifting, and so it's like, oh, you want to take that other path around that side of the mountain? Go for it. But, maybe not the smartest choice, but you have to let a lot of artists, especially nowadays where a lot of independents and people have had to gain great personal resolve for their own vision and sort of stick up for them for what they believe in. And it can be a bit of a fortress if you're not, if you're unable to break into that, because there's so many shysters and people that are looking to use artists to self-aggrandize and to boost their own careers, and at the expense of the artist sometimes. So I know there's a lot of artists that are very reluctant and girded against working with people in various collaborative capacities. But if you can...
I can see that being a challenge too for you, right? Like you get an artist, I'm going to step on you when you're saying this, but I want to inject this for a minute.
Yeah.
You get an artist that comes in and they might want something different. But we're talking about you have a couple albums out or they want writers and whatever this. And this guy's like, I kind of want to do this, but I'm pressured here. Like, I mean, that's a new animal you have to deal with. Like, how do you find a way to keep the label and happy, but also kind of, because I'm sure you would want to support the artist do something a little different too. How to take care of that is going to be a real challenge.
It is. And if I'm working for a label, that's the other unusual thing about the arrangement, is because I'm being paid by the label, but ultimately that's the artist's money, isn't it?
Right.
But the label will still look at me as an agent to get them what they want, the A&R person. And to me, I have to identify early on, is the artist and the A&R, are they on the same page? Do they even have the same vision? I mean, there is a little bit of Jedi mind trickery there when it has to be, because my goal is to always go for a win-win-win. I want to be able to create a product that I'm proud of, that the artist is proud of, and that the label is proud of. Because if one of those is lacking, then I think it's going to hurt the success of the project.
It's a good one, I think. And the problem is with the bank. I mean the label and the loan sharks. I mean agents want is a certain album sound that was a hit before, whereas they're not going to be like, you're like, I sounded just before, but it wasn't a hit before because no one was buying it, but now we love you because that's the sound people like.
Yeah.
So as they want their banking money, you're trying to be creative with a creative force, and then that balance is just,
It's challenging. It's challenging because there's a lot of factors involved. There's a lot of different influences and power struggles in that. I mean, if the artist has management, there's that too. Is the manager on the same page as the artist? And ultimately, I try to be a proponent of the artist first and foremost, because I tend to believe that if you are able to create product that is honest and authentic, then those aspects get communicated to the listener, I used to think about chasing a sound or someone else's work or a certain hit. And I decided that I can't do that anymore because I'm not being authentic. I'm trying to be somebody else. And I think artists, if they have a good sense of who they are, which is a big if, of course, but if they have a good sense of who they are and we can help develop that and nurture that, because it can be very fragile, especially early on, then that ultimately is what helps sort of get everyone else on board. Very rarely is it, a manufactured process where the label says you're going to do another. You had a hit on that first record. Now you're going to do another one just like it, and it's going to be just as big. And I mean, that almost never works. So, I think that pretty much proves it,
Well, I think it's changed too. I think artists now, they're going to either come in, they're either going to be 100% for a sound they want, because they know when they go out and they do these songs, if it's not, new music, a lot of them that's the beer break. You know what I mean? So like if they're performing, any genre of music, you add a couple songs in, depending on the audience, they're going to, not like it. They really like their songs, their couple albums, or, that's for everybody.
Well, it's important because I understand artists want to continually grow and evolve, and what's new is exciting to them as well. But if they have an established catalog, I think it's important to not turn their backs on that either, and to respect it. I don't like it when an artist like, Radiohead says, we're not going to perform any of those songs off of we're sick of those, it's, the Chuck Mangione, that trumpet player. Yeah. I was at that steakhouse up on Mulholland with Stills in the crowd after finishing the record. He took us out for a nice dinner, and he played a full set. And then, of course, for the encore, he's like, and now I'm going to play the song that bought me my house, that put my kids through college, and he had this attitude of gratitude about it, which I loved. It was sort of like, because are we really the owners of the work that we create, or are we just vessels that allow them to come through us, And I think if you have an ego about it, you feel like you own that, then you have a right to refuse it. But if you were just a vessel and it came through you, then in a way, the only way I think is respectful is to be, is to honor that. How lucky were you to have this beautiful thing come through you that became a cultural phenomenon, and so I appreciate that. I mean, Rush,
Black Rose did it, remember?
Pardon?
Black Rose did it.
Did they
did it. Now they're back doing it in their heads, but for a while they wouldn't do any of their stuff,
right? Yeah, and that has to be unsatisfying as an audience member. You go there, you want to hear the things that resonated with you emotionally, that represent a part of your life. Oh, I remember, me and my girlfriend, we're on this trip and we listened to this record. That's really important. I'll even take it as further. Alex Lifeson, the guitarist from Rush, said that whenever he played live, he would play every solo note for note exactly as it was on the record. And that was because when you're at home and you were a kid, and he did this too, he would listen to these records over and over and over again, and he would memorize these solos and everything that he heard on the record. And he went to see the band live, and they would completely ignore what they had done on the record and play some other version. It wasn't as satisfying to him. And so he said he always wanted to give his audience members that satisfaction of hearing it exactly as they've memorized it and exactly as it was on the record. Interestingly, in the brain, there's a certain dopamine release when the brain can anticipate what's going to happen next in music. One of the reasons like four on the floor dance music is so trance inducing is because of that, because there's this consistent, predictable repetition that actually is a little dopamine release in the brain. And so I think in a way, what he was giving to the audience is that dopamine of when you're air soloing, doing an air guitar solo and you're following along and everything is exactly the way you know it, there's an additional like pleasure center reward in there that works on us as humans, and so I could appreciate that.
I think also people like it shows on that level to that audience that, yeah, they can do it. Like, it sounded just like the album. And hopefully the album was done well.
Right. If it wasn't all edited together.
So that, so you learn in certain bands but then you get a certain type of audience that appreciates that, like you get the Rush audience that totally has a certain standard,
Right.
You get the joke when it's like 10,000 guys and four women come to it to appreciate the Rush show.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, at the other side of the coin would be maybe a Grateful Dead show or a jam band where every night is going to be a different interpretation, and that has more of a jazz mentality where you're there for the happening. I knew someone who was a Deadhead and he had like all the different recordings of all the different live shows, I guess that's the whole thing. And so for them, it was understanding what that January 12th performance in El Paso of that song was versus that, that's a level of connoisseurship that I was never.
I actually couldn't do it. And the fact that because they're jams to begin with, it's so loose and non-linear to me. I couldn't even grab it, that one performance, like note for note, and remember it. Right. And I had like 5 of them from like in different years. I'm like, I don't even know what I had yesterday. Do you know where my other sock is? Like, I just, you know what I'm saying? It's like a certain level, like, and it's not like it's challenging either. It's just like different. Some of it's just noodling. Sometimes there's moments of brilliance. I respect the artists for doing that. And it's, for the longest time took a while to even grab onto that and understand the Grateful Dead, audience and get it. I respect it. It's not my thing because songs I need a song. I need some meat and potatoes.
Right. And I was the same way. I had an assistant for a while that was a rabid Deadhead fan. And I was just like, I don't get it. What is, because these people would listen to just the Grateful Dead and nothing else. You know what I mean? Just like, but they would just cycle through different performances and different concerts. And I said, what is it about this? And he educated me on it. He said, in a way, and this is true to the roots of what the Grateful Dead came from, which was that they never claimed to be a great band writing great songs. Right. They were just supposed to be a soundtrack to your drug experience, basically a soundtrack to your trip, and in a way they were very good at that. That's exactly what they were, this sort of accompaniment to your experience. And I think those people that appreciated that can appreciate the Dead more. Maybe for people like us that are focused on songs and these little crafted pieces of confection, and performance are going to be disappointed in that,
Well, and I think we're beyond. I mean, we're the kind of people, we are absolutely just rabbit hole music people, So it's actually just beyond just even the normal casual listener.
Exactly. Exactly. It's got to hit a lot of buttons for us to appreciate. That's for sure.
It does. And unfortunately, it's ruined some music for me because of that certain stuff. Now, with your kind of go back to the technology, have you found or created anything like that you've been able to do with some of your own instrumentation and actually bringing this into your own music? Was what I want to segue into your own band. Like with your Hackintosh, creating your own sounds, have you kind of created some of your own soundscapes that maybe weren't out there because of your building of technology? You know what I'm saying? Or created a new way to do something?
I mean, since I've been using synthesizers for a long time, I understand those languages. I understand the methods of sound creation pretty well. Those are all the colors on my palette. Mm-hmm. But mostly for me, it comes from, I'm not really a cycle through presets kind of guy. Like it has to come here first. So I have to hear it in my head. And a collaborator, a drummer friend of mine from many years ago taught me this. It's like, hear it in your head first and then really get meditative and focus on describing that as explicitly as possible of what you're hearing, and then do your best to bring that out. So there's 2 things. One is having the great idea, right? Hearing an awesome sound in your head. and being able to hear it so specifically that you can describe aspects of that sound, and then having the facility and the technique to bring that sound into reality, and those are the two different things. It's one thing to hear a great sound, but if you can't, it's like having a great idea but not being good at talking or writing. If you don't have the words to communicate it, then it doesn't matter if you don't have a great idea, right?
True.
I used to want to teach creativity just as its own thing, regardless of the medium. Half of my family are visual artists, sculptors and painters. And I thought it was a good idea because I think that there's a lack of great creativity in general. But then I quickly realized that you need to have a craft. You need to have a medium that you are relatively expert at in order to express your creativity. Someone could have the greatest idea in the world, but if they're not a good writer or a good painter or a good musician, or be able to somehow communicate that, to bring that into this world, then you need some modicum of skill at one of those in order to actually get that idea out. So to me, having a great idea and the capacity to express it are the two aspects that have to go hand in hand in order to bring that to reality. So yes, I can focus and I can hear an idea in my head, and I can really dwell in that and hold it and develop it in its early nascent stages. And then I have the facility of all of my years of experience working with technology in order to say, okay, now what's the best way to bring this idea to reality? Is it FM synthesis? Is it analog? Is it sampling? Is it a guitar sound? Is it strings? Is it me beating on a kitchen?
Has it led you to create your own things? If you don't have it, you have the idea. Have you created your own sounds or created things out of your, because you hear a different way?
Most
You're I don't have it. I got to build it.
Right. Most of the time, if I'm working on a sound like that, I'll create it from scratch. And it doesn't mean I won't. I might bake a loaf of bread, but that doesn't mean I grind my own flour.
No, I get that. What I'm saying. I'm saying, but you have a certain innate skill. Well, example, you ever see the Sherlock with Benedict Cumberbatch or whatever, when he talks about, and then they do it and they break everything down really great, and he goes into his mind library. It's like this huge palace in his head. I imagine you have this huge mind library where you can just kind of go in and walk up, pull a book down because you have so much going on up there. But then there's a danger of not being able to do pen to paper and a guitar or a piano and the simple thing, because you have so much thought that you can do, and you have so much sound. It's like the danger when someone plays guitar and you get in the studio and you just want to just kind of smack you in the hand and be like, stop playing those pedals. There's at what point? But then the other thing is, you go to the Frank Zappa school, and he did push it and he did shop it, and it worked great.
Right.
It was the most beautiful thing you could do. But some people do that and you never see them again, and you have Chinese democracy, or you know what I'm saying?
I got asked to work on that record and I turned it down.
That would have been a good paycheck. You would have had steady pay.
Oh man, I was mixing a Steven Stills record at the Village, and I got the call, and it was going to be me engineering guitar overdubs with a guitarist out in one of the out near Pacific Palisades or somewhere out there. And I was already busy, but I thought to myself, there's 10 engineers at least that have worked on that record, if not more. And for me, just sitting there hitting record while a guitarist, that wasn't really appealing.
Well, I heard it got really weird. Buckethead actually had a farm animals. So it's they thought they got really animal stuff in there. I mean, it was insane. It
was Topanga. That's what it was. It was Topanga. So that explains it, right?
Right. So I'm like, just going to see don't even put your soda down next to the board. To me, and I'm like, he's bringing farm stuff in there and this and animal excrement. And I'm like, come on.
No.
But there are a few good songs on the album, but the whole point is you just don't know where to stop.
And that's very important. I've worked with a few artists that were, you have to sort of understand the power structure. If the artist is very successful and, the most powerful person in the room, then you're only going to have so much sway over the outcome. The person's going to do whatever they want to do. If I'm doing a mix for Steven Stills, I can get it up to where I think it's good, but he's going to make the changes that he wants to make because he's Steven Stills. You know what I mean? And that kind of stuff. But I want to get back to your earlier point about execution of technology and playing in the sandbox and how that can be a distraction. Because I
Yeah.
think many people, especially those that are interested in the recording process or the production process, fall into those traps. They get off the path of the cul-de-sac of messing around with a synthesizer for 6 hours. And part of it, it's twofold. One of it is that it's easier because they might feel more confident in their abilities tweaking some knobs and working on that than they are in maybe addressing the real problem, which is that that song needs a bridge, or something basic. I got to the point now where I've separated song and production so much that any song I'm working on has to work with one instrument and a vocal first. If it doesn't work with like a piano vocal demo or a guitar vocal demo, then there's some fundamental issues that need to be addressed with the song. The other stuff, the production value stuff, it's very important, almost just as important. But for those of us that are producerly minded and technically, we enjoy all of the aspects of modern production, we have to guard against that because that's safer territory for the person to go to. It's more soothing interior to be like, oh, I feel comfortable in my little sandbox playing with my toys. But it can be an escape from addressing the real issue, which is the fact that those lyrics for verse 2 need to be rewritten, And there is a pain. There's a certain pain that I will admit to about working on the hard stuff. Like, it's hard for a reason. Anything worth doing is hard. But when you have to sit down with a blank piece of paper and do something that you're not comfortable with, and that is not your area of comfort, like people who are into computers and producing or guitar amps and stuff, like whatever their technology is, that's such a lure. It's such a safe, comfortable place to go. It's back in your comfort zone. So there's a big pull to go there, instead of addressing the important issues. So yes, it's very important that the song work on its own, ignore the guitar pedals, ignore the plugins, and just get to the heart of the matter and address that first. And the rest of the stuff, to be honest, I almost look at that as a reward, like, okay, this song we worked out the whole structure of the song and the basic ideas of melody and lyrics, and it's all great. Now we get to come up with this really cool sound for verse 2. Like, that's almost a reward. You've built, it's like building a home, right? The initial stages of a building are very boring, girders, structure, doesn't look appealing. It's very pragmatic. But you need to do that in order to hang all of your ornamentation on it, right? You need that foundation, and then it serves its purpose. That's the icing on the cake. But sometimes you get songs that are just all icing and no cake.
And I get that. And I also think there's some danger of, like, especially with guitarists that want to try a new sound, and they are accomplished and they can write a song. It's in your nature for some people. Like, I'm not a great guitarist. I'm very deep. I have a basic cowboy chord. When I decided I wanted to learn guitar, with YouTube and stuff, you can do it. It was only a few years ago, right?
Right.
I got a guitar, and then I went online and got a secondhand one because I wanted to learn guitar. I took the second one and I took it apart. We painted it, like, because I wanted to learn how it worked. I got a book on how guitar works too.
Yeah.
And I also learned I can't solder with crap. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned there.
That's a different skill, that's for sure.
It is. But you get the point. Sometimes it's not because you're avoiding it. Because I was still playing guitar, you know what I mean? But you also want to go a little deeper. You're like, what other sounds can I do? How can I push myself? Which adds to even more, because when you're in the studio, it's like, oh, it's one more thing you got to deal with. Because then, what else can I do with this? It's good, but where else can I go with this? Where can I go to here? If you don't push it, that's also the challenge, Well,
it's funny because maybe when you first picked up a guitar, it was all new and all fresh to you, and inspirational and exciting. Then maybe after you did that for a while, the initial sort of blush wore off a little bit, and you got accustomed to that. You raised your level of expectation. I know what this instrument can do. Now that's not quite as new and fresh. Let's see what else we can get it to do. Maybe you experiment with tuning. Maybe you try different strings, or maybe you try a different guitar, and say, oh, this is also a guitar, but it feels completely different. And you can completely different tone out of it. And that makes you play differently too, doesn't it? And there's that really cool feedback loop between what you're able to do, pardon the pun, with the guitar and what it inspires you to do with the instrument too.
Well, that leads someone to don't like tone chasing forever. Me, I learned it now at this point. I'm like all these sounds or whatever, and then as I learned now, it's infinite. So I did like the war games. It's an old reference, right?
Right.
Calculation. Where you go like sound. What about this guitar? What about this here? What about this thing? Like nobody wins. Nobody wins. It's
right.
Like,
would you like to play a game?
Right. So like literally, I realized that I'm never going to be satisfied. It doesn't matter. So then I'm like, what am I looking for? I want a guitar. I can do rock sounds and warm guitar, and I want a song where I can do like one metal. How can I find myself in the middle and then ask around to kind of find myself a meet in the middle situation? Because I think if you just go too deep, that is you'll go forever.
It's the endless bottomless pit, and that's to me where having the initial big picture concept can help judge those decisions. Because if say you're tone chasing, right, and you're working on your amp and you're tweaking, and you get to the point where you've lost some objectivity, right? The way to always bring it back is to say, well, what am I trying to do with this guitar part in this song? What is the emotion we're trying to communicate? And use these other factors to influence the decision you're making. That's use the macro to help you with the micro, So if one setting is more, I don't know, punky or whatever, and the other sound setting is maybe more refined, well, is it a song that needs a punkier image? Are we trying to go for a punkier vibe on this track? Well, then that can help you, because to me, there is no objective good or bad. It's literally, how does it serve the greater good? Like what's the goal here? And does that, maybe a trashier sound is exactly what you need. Maybe we need to use a little what is it called? The cigarette pack amp, or maybe we need a giant Marshall stack. All of those decisions, while we all have our individual opinions and we go and just try them out, it all has to do with, does it serve the greater good? I mean, just like to keep beating the dead horse of the food analogy, are certain spices good or bad? Well, you can't really answer that if you're cooking, grape jelly is awesome unless you're making spaghetti. You know what I mean?
Yeah, true.
So it's all that. It's all relative, isn't it?
So when you're doing that, so like actually that's the question with an artist, if you say you think you have a better mix, an idea of the artist, would you say, have you done this? Like you do one version, like do what they want, and then like say you do a separate one, and then say, here's what I'm thinking, and then present them both to at least kind of be like, check them out. This is where I'm thinking. Where an artist can go, oh yeah, I see that now, because
yes,
you can't always get outside of your own head, and that's not a bad thing. It's just how we are as humans. But you can say, this is your sound, like with Stephen Stills. I've seen him before in concert. I love him, so this is a great example. And you're like, I hear a little something different though, and with an artist, you can say, hey, is that something you would do to an artist that you've done?
Well, Stephen is, of course, an exception to most,
I don't want to say him,
my experiences.
Right.
But yeah, I had when I was mixing one of those records, I had a mix totally bumping that, like the assistant was jumping up and down. Everyone thought it was the best mix I had done on the record. And Stephen came in and he said, I hate it, and he said, this is supposed to be a Motown song. And I was like, oh man, I completely missed it. Completely missed the boat on that one. And so that reinforced to me how important it is to understand the expectations and the vision of the artist, of course, with someone of that stature. But in general, what I've learned is that it's almost pointless to discuss things intellectually when it comes to these kinds of decisions. I used to try to convince artists that I had an idea or my direction was better or anything like that. So not only is it a waste of time, but it generates animosity and conflict where it doesn't need to be. My philosophy now is to always try everything. And so I find that if you can, it's so much easier to like, instead of arguing with somebody about whether it's a good or a bad idea, just try it. And then if you're lucky, 9 times out of 10, the answer will become apparent to everyone. And then
and if you're not the bad cop.
You know what I mean? Then you don't have to be the one that's telling them they're wrong, which is that gets filed away. You don't want to have a lot of those experiences because
Yeah.
it can build up if there's conflict later. So it's really important to try everything. I never say no to any idea in the studio without trying it. Even if I know in the back of my head, that's crazy, that'll never work. I always want to validate people's ideas and give them the opportunity to explore it to their own satisfaction. Because then once they've exhausted that idea and they come around and see that I was right all along, ha ha ha.
So yeah.
Then it's on their own terms, and they appreciate that they went on that journey
On
to
that journey.
arrive, instead of just me, telling them that they're wrong and having that be a interpersonal dynamic that I don't really want in the studio.
So that's a good thing, and it really you can really help flesh out a song, the best of the song on technology and songwriting and an artist.
Actually, and to add to that, the contrapositive is that what if it turns out that guy's idea was actually great?
Right.
And I wasn't the one that was able to comprehend it. So then I step out of my own ego and I say, let's serve the song here and see which works best. So we try the idea. It turns out to be a great idea. Yeah. Well, then I don't have to, eat crow or whatever either. You know what I mean? So it's all just in the service of the track, which I love. That's, to me, the best way to be.
So with that being said, how do you do that with your own music?
Well,
like, how do you balance your ideas? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, it's important. I'm lucky in that I have a pretty strong river of internal ideas. There's like, if I could clone myself into 3 people,
But arguably, everybody feels that they have the strong version coming in now. Like, I'm sure all your artists feel a lot of them feel they have their own ideas too.
You'd be surprised. A lot of people are either insecure about it or not even developed in the sense of having a clear vision. Some artists are just more like, hey, I wrote these songs and I want to put them on my next record. Other people do
make them sound good.
Right, exactly. Other people do have a strong notion. With like the current Aerosol project that we just finished, I'm very lucky to have a collaborator in a gentleman named Matt Brownlee, who was an assistant of mine at one point, but then he went on to be chief engineer at Westlake, and he's actually got a Grammy for a big band record that he's recorded, and he's established and on his own too. And he has been a great foil for me. I think it's very important to have a foil in every
I think you
project.
need someone to challenge you. Maybe like, all right, that's good, but you can't.
Exactly.
I mean, there are some anomalies of artists that do great music, but I must just think as a personal artist trying to grow, you can keep writing out the same albums and new albums, be like the hitmaker, like Prince, for instance, and just keep doing it. But imagine if Prince had somebody sat next to him and said, "No, dog," just once in a while.
He may have had that at some point too. Yeah.
From what I've heard of you,
never. Yeah, it's possible.
But I don't know. The point is, at that level, because what if happened like to challenge you? Like if you have a respected peer and you're like, no, and then like it could be like one level higher, like one better, but you've never pushed yourself because that's your good running speed.
There's so many great analogies for this story. First of all, we know so many great bands that have those 2 Remus and Romulus fighting people, right? And I love it. You're either trying to prove them right or you're trying to prove them wrong. And it forces you to dig deeper and come up with something even better. The sports team analogy also works. Say you're a championship team at the top of your game and you're playing a very lowly team that's not going to do well. You'll find that your own performance will slip. You kind of play at the level of your opponent. In fact, the word compete or competition means to strive together, as in together. So you require a formidable opponent in order to bring the best out of yourself. And I love that because, you need to play against a really great team to see what you're capable of. And I think that works in the creative process too, to have someone that challenges you. And sometimes I do this, it's me and the artist, and I'm the one that's challenging them, but either challenging them to do better, to call bullshit on something when it needs to have it called, or just to pick them up and encourage them, if they're feeling down too. But it is very important. And Matt has been that for me on this latest iteration of Aerosol, where I'll bring a song to him and his tastes are very stratospheric in his expectations. You know, he doesn't do well with anything that's sort of middle of the road. So he's always pushing me further and further out, you know, which
which
I
is
really
awesome.
appreciate. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
great. It's great to have someone.
You need that Jagger, Richards push pull. I mean, you can't. There's a reason why well, of course, it usually always a blow up. But like, look at some of the best bands, some of the best songs of the years that break up, get together. But look at the chemistry in some of those bands, and then look at some of the bands that kind of go, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
There's no
yeah.
challenge. I mean,
If it's a dictatorship, it usually becomes monochromatic, one-dimensional, and
boring,
relatively boring. Yeah,
right?
yeah. I think you need that dynamic. It's vital, and it's
It's
the
exciting,
formula for
explosive.
creating the best work you're ever going to create. You know, the Stoics say that every man secretly desires to be faced with adversity because that's how we are able to find out what we're made of. You know, and that if you lead a life of luxury and no challenges, and we know this with artists, we know artists that have led very pampered lives and never really had to struggle through anything, and their music kind of reflects that. You know, they don't really have much to say. And then we have other artists with amazing backstories that have overcome incredible diversity. And these people, when they speak, we feel like they're coming from a perspective of, you know, having been tempered in the fires, you know, and having come through it. And we love that. We love that as humans, that sort of overcoming adversity is very important in the hero's journey or in most movies and stories that we like as a
Any of us day to day, I feel that my best moments when I look back at stuff, we're getting somewhere, getting to that point,
right,
Because once you're to the point, I'm like, that's boring. Like, I know I see
right,
myself go downhill on anything. So now I
yeah,
see challenges coming up. I can actually get excited. I'm like, I know I don't want to do it, but now I have to do it, and
yeah,
it's kind of exciting on a
yeah,
level. You know,
absolutely, absolutely, because you know you're going to grow, you know you're going to maybe discover something about yourself in the process.
yeah.
And that's, you know, hopefully what this whole crazy journey is all about.
With your music, what is the end game with your music? As far as like with COVID and putting it out, and whether the videos are playing, or because you have a mixed uh, players on your album too, so that's always gonna be a challenge if you want to explain
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Well, you know, just the story's been on a bit of a journey. I'll just give you a little backstory. Me and Matt I've released music under the Aerosol rubric for a long time, but this particular incarnation started about 2018, 2019, when a longtime friend of mine, drummer Sean Reinert from Death and Cynic, I had done a couple of Cynic records and some work with his side project, Eon Spoke. He had finally he had departed Cynic, and so he was very excited to work on this new project. It was going to be the three of us as this core. We started writing all these demos and worked on all this material. And then I was in Chicago at the time, and then I came back here December of 2019, and we were all set to put it into high gear. You know, we were going to finish the songs, go in the studio, record. Sean was very excited because he felt like he could really stretch out and do whatever. I gave him carte blanche to do whatever
Yep.
because we're both conservatory musos, and I knew he was going to come up with some crazy stuff anyway. And then tragedy struck in January. He died suddenly, and so we had to reassess the project. And in a way, I think he's become a bit of the guardian angel of this project, because although we have him recorded on a couple of songs, and we were able to use the other songs we didn't have him recorded on yet. And it was actually at the memorial service for him where I met all of these other amazing drummers. And I realized that he was much more influential in his circle than I had any idea of. I mean, you know, cover of Drummer magazine, and NPR did a piece on him when he passed. Anyway, so all these amazing drummers were there. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I think that maybe they would be interested in offering as tribute to him a performance on this record too. And so I proposed the idea, and everyone loved it. They thought, this is great. We can finish this project. It became dedicated to him instead of a collaboration with him. And so I'm very lucky to be working with. We had Mike Heller from Fear Factory and Raven playing a couple of
Yeah.
songs. Dirk Verburen from Megadeth and all of his other groups played on like 2 or 3 tracks too. And so now it's become this collaborative effort. We do want to play live. We're very much looking forward to that. COVID was is and continues to be a mixed blessing. Whereas we're all isolated, but at the same time, these drummers wouldn't have been able to play on this performance, on this record, if they were out touring with their normal acts. So everyone was at home, everyone worked remotely, everyone had their home studio setups and were able to record, and we were able to collaborate that way. So that's great. We're very much looking forward to putting the show together for live. Hopefully when it's released this fall, we can make that happen, so. It's interesting because having been making records for so long, I still feel relatively ignorant about like promoting and releasing, because so much of my job ended when the masters were done and I'd hand them over to the powers that be, and so that I look at it as sort of my weak point, which is that knowing what to do with the product once it's done. And that's what I'm woodshedding on these days, is learning all of that stuff too.
Which is hard, because if you're really focused on just the integrity of the music, once you start promoting yourself, it feels like you're not doing that anymore.
Oh,
you're
it's
yourself in a level.
Great challenge. I used to, early on in my ignorant, self-important days as a young fledgling producer and mixer, I used to look derisively at the other components of the music business. That attitude of like, well, we're the creators, we're the artists, you're just support staff, and you don't know what it's like. You shouldn't have any say, and it's artist driven. And now I've come to have such an appreciation for how important these people are in the jobs that they do. Everyone from management, label people, promotion, marketing, even lawyers, and how that the whole thing is a machine, and everyone plays a role and are a cog in the machine. The product, the art is important too, but let's face it, without all of those other things, you're just, singing to yourself in your bedroom, and so I now I have a much greater appreciation for how important those people are in those roles that I used to.
And it's also a special thing, those roles. Not everybody can sell. Like there are people that are born to sell and they're okay with it. It doesn't bother them. It's not a moral issue to do it. It's just, that's just how it feels right for them. Like you feel like those people would feel awful in the studio, like they can, do all the stuff and handle it. It's just too much.
Right. And what I appreciate,
they feel comfortable at.
A lot of them are, at the heart, they are diehard music fans, and they wanted to be in this business. They never fancied themselves, many of them, as musicians or artists themselves, but they loved music so much that they made it their passion and they made it their career choices. And so I honor them. A rabid diehard fan is worth their weight in gold, and for them to be involved in the project, it's like having family involved. You don't have to question loyalty. You don't have to wonder whether they're, doing it for the wrong reasons or anything like that. Because like managers, for example, a manager has to be basically an artist's number one fan, and that's, to me, probably the most important thing. And if they're not that, they've probably got some other agenda,
Or they're not showing up. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the whole thing. I mean, the manager I think it's the hardest job. You have to have a skill set, if you can, in everything. You have to be strong and then sensitive. You got to know some business, and you got to know some creative.
A little bit. It's a little bit. You have to have one foot in each world. Producing is that way a little bit. I have to talk to the suits, and I have to talk to the artists. I have to talk to the lawyers, and I have to work out deals.
That actually sounds more like Twister.
Yeah. It can be, and it's quite.
Put your arm behind your leg and just not comfortable.
It's funny. Talk about the old idea of right brain and left brain, and right brain creativity and left brain technology and logic and stuff like that. But early on, people like myself that were interfacing with computers and music at the very onset, I was doing research about people with these kinds of skills, people that use technology to create art. And what we found is that there's a tremendous amount of corpus callosum activity, which is, that connective part of the brain between the two halves. And what it does is eventually you get good enough at the technology that you can kind of make those like subroutines. So you can stay in your creative half and then send little commands over your corpus callosum to the other side of the thing. Whereas someone that wasn't so accomplished in it might have to spend a lot of time figuring out how to do something. The point is, you get to the point where you don't have to think about that too much. And I can draw on my work as a classical pianist, because when you're, or any musician performing, when you're learning a part, you're thinking about fingerings, you're thinking about hand positions and all the technical things. But hopefully, when you get to the point where you've memorized all that stuff and you've memorized it with muscle memory in your hands, you're not thinking about that ever again. They say the best way to be when you're performing is almost like you're just listening, where you're not thinking about any of the technical stuff. You're just thinking about the emotion, or you're putting yourself in the right frame of mind, and so it's great. I think people that are very good at those jobs have this ability to sort of dwell in one and then like communicate to the other one and go back and forth between them. And that's its own skill. A great manager, great person that works with artists, but also has to deal with commerce, itself. I mean, those people are worth their weight in gold, I swear.
Okay, so
it's true.
This new project's coming out. Do you have a date for it, or is it, where are we at with it?
Not yet. I think we're a couple of months out from it, at least. So I'm saying, what's today? Early September. So maybe November, maybe Thanksgiving, maybe Christmas at the latest. Okay. I guess there's a lot of lead times with production, like vinyl and stuff like that. And, it used to be a 3-month lead time for releases. So I guess that would be a safe outside figure. So
just curious. So
before the end of the year.
But once I get my hands on it, I'll check it out, and then maybe you can come back and we can talk about it. I like to go through the songs.
That'd be awesome. I'd love that.
I'd love to break it down after that. So we'll have you back when your album comes out. I want to thank you. This has been awesome. A lot of thinking, a lot of brain stuff here.
Thank you. My pleasure. It's really been enjoyable and quite an honor to be asked to be on.
Oh, it's the same, right? If I get you.